Welcome to Issues of Contemporary Politics with Dr. Brovkin playlist and War in Ukraine playlist. Today I'd like to talk about what is on the buzz in the news everywhere, Putin's ultimatum to the West, to NATO, and the red lines crossed, or the last red line crossed. So I would like to go over the words and deeds, or the positions, official positions, and the meaning of those positions of all the major parties, which is, I'll discuss the neocons in the United States and the critics of this policy in the United States. That's the two various points in the American position on Ukraine war and on missiles to Ukraine. Then what Putin has said and what it means, and again different interpretations of that, then what Zelensky says and what he does, and finally a word about the Chinese position, which may be important. So let's start with the American position. The American position, one analyst has described as salami escalation, which means that with every new crisis, with every new weakening of Ukraine in this current war, there's more given to it. But escalating it a piece at a time, that's the salami tactics. First there was Abraham tanks, and then there were Javelin missiles, or the other way around, and then there was more missiles, and now the question is whether the United States will permit Ukraine to hit at the territory of Russia, the territory that is recognized officially as Russian territory, not the disputed territories in Donbass. And the question is, speculation is whether they will, whether they not, why they will, why they wouldn't. No, I'd like to focus on the war aims. What exactly is the United States seeking? What do they say and what do they mean? Now, what they say, everybody knows. What they say is that they want to defeat Russia. They want to sustain Ukraine, supposedly a democracy. They want to weaken Putin's regime. Some, such as Nuland and others, have been talking about regime change in Russia. And another aim is to inflict as much damage to Russia as possible. So this is the official position of the neocons, of Biden and Harris and the State Department and Blinken, and this is what they want. Now, before I go to Trump and some other critics in the military to this position, I'd like to discuss, is that possible? Is that feasible? Is that feasible from purely military point of view? If Ukraine receives X number of missiles and begins targeting and hitting interior of Russia, airfields, stockpiles of weapons, etc. Will that make a difference? Will that change the course of the war? That's the first question. The second question, will these targets, or the hitting of those targets, create a regime change? Would that weaken Putin's regime, as they call it, to such an extent that there would be mass protests or revolution, or what they're dreaming about? Will that happen? And the third question is, if this cannot be done, then why aren't you doing it? So the military aspect is this. Now, all military specialists say that in order to be effective, the precision targeting must be on a large scale, so that to overcome Russian air defenses. So now the Ukrainians have almost run out of Atacms missiles. There were about 300 given to them. They are out of almost all of them. So United States has to give them like another 300 that could be used all in one time in order to make some kind of effect and overrun Russian defenses. Now, is that possible? No, physically, militarily, it is not possible. That's not my opinion. This is the military specialist. Why? Well, because these missiles are launched from aircraft, and Ukraine has only 14 remaining F-15 aircraft. So this is not enough. If they launch it from bases outside Ukraine, they become automatically party to the conflict, and then they will be hit, as Russians have said. So there is not enough aircraft and there is not enough missiles in order to do that. Now, but that may be enough to inflict enough damage so that there is a revolution, protests, and so forth. That's also not going to work because since the Kursk operation, Putin's popularity has even grown. Some estimates are that he had about 80-something%. Now it's over 90%. So there's a tremendous patriotic upheaval. And the more they do what the Russians perceive as terrorist acts, hitting Russian apartment buildings near Moscow or other civilian facilities, the more there will be support for the regime. So if they cannot do it, why are they doing it? Well, they're doing it because they are dreaming of defeating Russia, because they feel that this is at least the more damage done, the better. Now let's go to the critics. There are two types of critics of this position in American political spectrum. I start with Trump and Vance, who basically correctly reminded candidate Harris that Russia is a military superpower and has nuclear weapons. And to hit its territory with American missiles is treading a very dangerous line that could easily escalate. And not only Trump, many others have said that, to nuclear war. Is it worth it? Is it worth for America to engage in a nuclear conflict so that Ukraine has 2 or 4 Russian provinces? Russian because people who live there are Russian. They voted to be with Russia. They had always been Russia for hundreds of years until the breakup of the Soviet Union. So what's the point? Well, that's one of the political reasons. Now, Vance articulated more specifically Trump promised to settle peace, and that is that the Ukraine recognizes the loss of Donbass and declares that it is going to be a non-NATO country. Pretty much along the lines of what Putin mentioned in his June and then repeatedly in July. So this looks like a possibility, but I will argue later that it's not. So there's this military opposition, one could call it, who basically say it's not going to reach its objectives. Also, among the military objectives, they point to the following, which everybody should be aware of. Russia has a very, very good, if not one of the best, air defense systems. Now, it cannot defend every apartment building in the territory of the Russian Federation, but it can certainly mount a very serious defense of military targets, of military installations such as airports and stockpiles of ammunition and so forth. And they had shown this, that there were at one point 10 ATACMS missiles sent to Crimea, and 9 of them were intercepted. So this is one reason. Second, military opposition says that this gives away American military technology for Russians to capture, study, and create countermeasures. So this is kind of weakening in the American military might, in a sense that it shows all the things that America is fighting with, and that leads Russians to develop countermeasures. Now, let's move on to the Russian position, which is President Putin made its strongest warning up to date when he said 2 days ago that the passing on the missiles and the permission of those to use against the deep interior of Russia would mean that it is a participation in the war, and Russia would say take appropriate measures. Now, what a lot of Western commentators do not explain why he said it's a direct participation of war, as he put it very clearly, because the targeting and the satellites and the programming, all of that to use those missiles is done by NATO instructors or specialists. Ukrainians cannot do it on their own. Therefore, that is a direct participation. Now, he said he would take the measures, and people are speculating what kind of measures, and I'm not going to do it what kind of measures, but I am kind of convinced that it would not be nuclear. it would not be nuclear. Because why go nuclear when Russia is winning the war in Ukraine? It's just no point. The people who go to nuclear are of desperation. If Russia were losing the war, then it might go to nuclear. So I think Putin's position is a severe warning that something serious will be done. Some military response will be, but I do not think it's going to be nuclear, especially not at this stage. Now, briefly about Zelensky's words indeed. Zelensky said when he moved into Kursk area, a Russian province, that it's a negotiating tactics, that he wants to negotiate. And he repeats there's going to be some kind of another peace summit and negotiations. This is, of course, just this is a position that is, strangely enough, playing into Putin's hands, because he says he's going to negotiate. But in fact, what he's doing from the Russian point of view is terrorism. They're hitting apartment buildings, they're targeting the Belgorod and Kursk provinces with artillery shelling. In other words, Putin's attitude, no negotiations with Zelensky regime. This is clear from not only Putin's words, but the public opinion and what was said in the United Nations by Russian Representative Nebezia. So what Zelensky is doing, it is out of desperation. He really, what his goal is not negotiations. His goal is the opposite, is to involve the United States in the war against Russia and to get NATO in the war against Russia. But they don't want to, and that's the point. So they want to support Ukraine, they want to sound like they're giving it all the weapons, but they want to keep it up afloat, but they cannot afford to get into a nuclear war because it's not worth it. A couple of words about the Chinese position. The Chinese goal in all of this, what they say is they want to be intermediary. They want to, they pretty much want to support Russian position, Putin's position on 4 provinces and no NATO expansion. So that really got Zelensky very upset, and he was, scolding the Chinese and the Brazilians and so forth. But what really the Chinese want, they want peace, because they want trade, and they want One Belt, One Road initiative. They want to trade with Europe, even more than they want to trade with the United States. These are important markets for Europe, and for that point of view, they do need Russia as a important geographical position of between East and West, and its railroads and its sea routes in the north. So the Chinese want to compromise, and Putin says to Xi, yes, we are willing. But in fact, he knows that Zelensky doesn't want to and denies any possibility of any compromise. So the paradox of the situation is that Zelensky is actually helping Putin by denying, by saying they're not going to give up any of the provinces, that they would hold on to it and negotiate only on the condition that Russia withdraws all the troops. This position makes it possible for Putin to say to the Chinese and to the Indians and Brazilians, see, we offer peace, we want to negotiate, but they don't want to. They want all of it, which is ridiculous because we're not going to give up Russian territory. So in a sense, Zelensky is playing into Putin's agenda and Putin's aims. This is a kind of a paradox. Now, finally, to round it all up, what it all adds up to. I don't think there will be a nuclear war anytime soon. I hope so, unless people go crazy and start really shooting madly a huge number of missiles into Russia, which, as I said, is physically impossible, at least from Ukraine. What is going to happen is that Russian offensive will continue, and it would accelerate. And the more they shoot weapons, the more it will accelerate. With results that would be, at least Donbass probably will be taken by Russia by the end of 2024. By that time, we will know the result of elections and whether Trump would be president and offer his peace terms, and if not, then the current policy of salami increases in escalation would continue, but Russia would be much closer to victory, and then they would decide if it's going to be just a compromise, which is possible now, which is 4 provinces plus no NATO expansion, or whether they will go further and establish a satellite state out of the rump Ukraine, or a protectorate, or even incorporate most of it into Russian Federation. We shall see, but this is where things are going. Thank you very much. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, to buy my book, From Lenin to Putin, and I'll see you next time. Love your comments. Bye.